So I think we're going to start, if we may. And thank you very much for coming this afternoon to be present at what promises to be a very wonderful experience, which is to sit and be in the presence of Esther David. So may I, on your behalf, welcome her here today. And she has many, many themes and engagements that have been the result of a wonderful, wonderful life. And she's going to just talk about her writing and where she comes from today. And by way of an introduction, if I may just start to ask you to reflect on where you come from. Because Esther, in her own way, is the sum of many wonderful influences, many happy accidents, many extraordinary choices, which began a number of years ago, we won't say when, but so too is the possibility of your life. So you all belong somewhere, you all come from somewhere, you've landed up here, and you're in the process of learning and transforming yourselves to become something else. So I think it's a wonderful moment to reflect, to understand and hear about an extraordinary life, and to know that you too have ahead of you wonderful lives. So without further ado, could I ask Soumya to come and give a small token of our appreciation? Thank you, on your behalf. Thank you very much. So in her own way, Esther will create a narrative now for you, and then at a stage, when it's appropriate, maybe there'll be the chance to have questions and share some of these thoughts and ideas. So I think I'll let her do the storytelling, but we're looking forward to a wonderful, engaging afternoon. Thank you very much, Esther.
Good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me for talking about the subject. It's taken a lot of discussion with Katrina to come to this point about homeland, which is in its way very seems simple, but it's where you belong. You say words like this place, that place, or sometimes in India we use the word native place. So I like the word native place very much. Let me start by telling you that I don't know how many students I suppose know or don't know that I'm a Jew. I'm Jewish. But I'm an Indian Jew. That's the difference. Although there are 5 different categories of Jews in India, and I am a Bnei Israel Jew. So somewhere when somebody, like in the earlier days, there was an application form where you had to write name and this and that and caste and religion and everything, and I had to fill in this little word called Bnei Israel Jew, while all my friends had different methods of introducing themselves. So I had to literally, because I don't come from a very religious family or anything, so I had to remember the word as to how do I write Bnei Israel Jew. Bnei is B-E-N-E and Israel as Israel, but in the Hebrew pronunciation we say Israel, and Jew is Jew. Well, in Gujarati it could be a joke when I was younger and my Gujarati friends used to make fun of me. So that's how I'm a Bnei Israel Jew. Now, whenever I say I'm a Bnei Israel Jew, the first question is, oh, you're from Israel. And I say, no, I'm not from Israel. It is just a sort of a caste. And it's just in Hebrew, it means the children of Israel. So that's the community I belong to. And according to what happened that we were 2000 years and more back now, these are stories about which I cannot vouch for, because we were persecuted by the Greeks in Israel, and we were sort of fleeing in a ship, and we landed in the coast of Alibag in India, near Bombay. And That is how we came to India. So it's a very simple story. But in the shipwreck, what happened that our books went into the sea. So we had no proof to say that who we were. But there were some indications, and as we all know, there's something called an oral tradition. So through the oral tradition, it was decided that we were Jews, and that happened much later when our families were soldiers in the British Army and the Dutch were also there. So they said, okay, these are Jews. That is how we happened to be in India for so many years. Let me also explain that there are 5 communities which I told you. There is the Cochin, Jews of Cochin, who actually came from Spain, and their slaves, the people who came with them to work were slaves. I don't like the word, but the people who came to work with them were also converted. And there were already some Jews who had come through the Silk Route and the Spice Route and settled there, who are now known as Malabari Jews. So there's, in a sense, there is a slight discrimination between the two. Then there were the Baghdadi Jews who came around the 18th century from Iraq. And interestingly, they first came to Surat and then moved to Calcutta. So a large number of Baghdadi Jews live in Calcutta. And then we discovered there were some Jews in Andhra Pradesh who are known as Bene Ephraim, because we are known as the 10 lost tribes. And I belong to the Bene Israel, who is the Zebulun. That is a little complicated, so let's forget it. And then there is in Mizoram, the northeast, where there are Bene Menash, the Jews. They are also Jews. So there are 5 communities. Most of them have immigrated to Israel. So we have a very, very small community in India. So I think let me start with a small clip which will give you a little idea as to what happens, like what is the meaning of a Jew. We go to a synagogue, and a synagogue is also, we refer to it as a temple. So that is one interesting aspect. In Ahmedabad, it is at Bukhara Mohalla at Khamasat Crossroads, opposite the Parsi Fire Temple, where there are churches and temples and everything. So it's a very interesting area or space of communal harmony, in a sense. So this is where, but what it meant to me when I was growing up as to the sounds, because I was, as I told you, that we first belonged to a joint family in Delhi Darwaza, that's the old city. The old city of Ahmedabad, to which I'm still connected. So, and I still feel very strongly about Ahmedabad, old city, and I say Ahmedabad means the old city. So that's why we had a joint family where we lived in a huge little small Haveli type in Mohalla. And slowly this integrates and becomes nuclear families. So only one grandmother, we all have the story of a grandmother who gives us so much, and we never forget her. So there was only grandmother who kept the laws of Judaism alive in the house. Everybody else was almost forgetting what it was like to be Jewish. But sometimes memory, everything stays in the mind and it doesn't quite disappear, and it comes back to you at various stages. So what is it feel in a synagogue? So let me show you a small clip.
Shabbat menuka Hemnatale babon Leuma sebura Linfasot nikabon Neshamaye tera Lenefes mesera Yashiranaka.
There are many stories about how the Jews came to India,
But basically, even if you read any historical books about the Jews or you read any matter, the first thing that you have to accept that there is no authentic record about how the Jews came to India. But the story that we believe in is that after the fall of the second temple of King Solomon, perhaps, I'm saying perhaps, I'm not myself very sure, that they came by ship and they got a shipwreck near Bombay. Through the years and during that shipwreck, they lost all the books. They lost all the books, they lost all the material they had, so all they were left with was some oral traditions. Only much later when the Dutch or the English, when we started having soldiers in the army, there was a rabbi who came and he realized that they were not eating fish without scales, or they were saying the Shema Israel. Bibles were brought from the Netherlands and the England, and then these were translated into Marathi, and these translations helped the Bene Israel Jews to know more about their religion. As a child, I used to come to the synagogue with my grandmother. She was always very particular that we should go to the synagogue, but the prayers used to be held in Hebrew, so I did not understand so much, and my family did not really give me that sort of education. So I've been coming and going more out of curiosity. So in the first book, The Walled City, there is an element of curiosity. The main aim of The Walled City was based on such experiences that I had as a young girl. So this was Hebrew, and I was as lost as everybody else. Now during this time, while I was, and let me tell you that in this end of this week, we will be celebrating Passover. That is, Passover literally means passing over. That is, when our patriarch, the Jewish patriarch Moses, who is also pronounced as Moshe in Hebrew. I don't know how many of you have seen the film Ten Commandments. Is that they were slaves in Egypt, and it is said that they were also part of the laborers building the pyramids, and Moses sort of helped them with the will of the Lord. We are not supposed to take God's name just like that, so the name is Lord. And they crossed the Red Sea, and if you remember that very beautiful visual in the films where the waters part and they run through, and then they are chased by the Pharaoh's soldiers. So we will be celebrating that festival at the end of this month, and soon after, in another, say, 20 days or 1 month, we will be celebrating Shavuot, which is when we receive the 10 Commandments. And what happened when the 10 Commandments were received by the patriarch Moses was that when he came down from the mountain, he saw that the Jews were sort of not behaving what is known in the proper manner, and they were like, idol worship is not allowed, and they were doing idol worship. So he got very angry and he threw the 10 Commandments, which broke. And but as you saw in the visual, the two plaques, marble plaques, are the 10 Commandments, one written in English, one written in Marathi. Because we landed on the Konkan coast, Alibag, our mother tongue, see the word, mother tongue, is Marathi. And we say our motherland is India. But fatherland and homeland is Israel. So that sort of a little makes it shaky and puts you out of context to many things. So eventually, the Lord was also angry, as you have seen in Michelangelo's paintings, and he said that, okay, now you can wander in the desert for 40 years. So the whole concept of the wandering Jew somehow took place. So most people who have read about Jews, whenever they meet somebody who is maybe like me, they say, are you like a wandering Jew? And you say, maybe, because a streak from a very, very long time enters somewhere within you. But that is how the concept of the wandering Jew takes place. And they were all for 40 years in search of a homeland, which they found very near Israel in a small place. And then eventually Israel was to happen much, much later. So this is more or less how it happened. Now, how I started writing about, I started writing Jewish literature, novels based on the Jewish life, because as I already told you, I was extremely confused. I didn't know where I was going. But during that period, I was studying art at Amherst University, Baroda, and I was into art, and then I was an art critic. But that part, I will first show you some visuals. Before that, I just forgot to show you that because I have a large collection of old photographs. And so this is the family I come from. And actually my father was making a zoo at that time. The zoo at Kakaria Lake is made initially by my father. My mother was a school teacher. So somehow all these photographs were in a big bag put away. And then slowly through the years it so happened that anybody in the family who didn't want old photographs, they all came to me, including recipe books and all sorts of books. So at the moment I have a large collection of all that nobody wanted in the family. Actually I don't have much of a family anymore in Ahmedabad. They've all left for either Israel or America or England or Canada or Australia and of course Israel, very much in Israel. But this is a real family photograph of a Jewish family. That's my great-grandfather with the big beard sitting in the middle. And next to him, just above him, is my grandfather. And next to him, the lady in the side of the head covered is my grandmother, Shebabet, who had this big, enormous influence on my life because both my parents were working, so they would leave me with her. And you can see the wide range of dresses. The lady here, she's wearing a 9-yard sari like Maharashtrians. And they used to be with everything, with nose rings and armlets and anklets and waistbands and everything, but no bindi. That was a rule. Jews in India don't appreciate a bindi, but mine is another matter. And there you see also that lady eventually was to become a doctor, and she was brought up in a very westernized way. She was Aunt Rachel, and that is how the whole family story goes. But it was all forgotten when I went to Baroda. This is just a small part of me. That's why I'm making a portrait of my father, and that's a wood carving by me. Yeah, so this is how I was in the art world. And then in Gujarat, so in this whole process, in Ahmedabad I was teaching. I was also teaching at SEPT in somewhere around 1967, 68 I think, as a fresh graduate from Baroda. And then moved on to other areas of teaching. First was art history, sculpture, art history, art appreciation, color, all sorts of subjects. So now during this time I got very involved in outsider art. Outsider art means where there are artists who are not trained in, they're not, they've never been to, they're not even educated, they've not been to college, they're not, they're uneducated. So I was very fascinated because in an art school somewhere, you get very conditioned to everything. So I decided to break that particular formula, and I worked with a lot of NGOs and then created my own NGO called Action to Art. Even that I closed down when I started writing. I'll show you some works from there. So first is, this is a moon god, and this was when there were floods in the river Sabarmati, and they were relocated to other areas, Sankalit Nagar. So I discovered when I was working with Father Edvity. So at that point, this is Pushpa Rajana, who was actually from Mathura, and for her, Krishna and Radha were the main, and she considers herself as a sort of a Radha. And this is her painting. I think it's amazing as an artist, and when I was an art student and everything, and how difficult it is, the creative process, to see such an amazing work by a woman who's never been conditioned to art. So I went in this area for many, many years. I'm still very passionate about outside art. Yeah, and then I met one woman who was of the Devi Puja community, and she was making masks. So I went to, because of my background in sculpture, I said, let me try that also. So let me show you this. This is the mask. But unfortunately, it so happened that it was impossible to find any form of market for these artists. So I eventually closed down because everybody, this I'm not attacking anybody. Most people who run certain organizations, they'd rather that it's market. While say if they make one elephant, it should look like 1,000 elephants should look the same. Well, I believe that if anybody is an artist, that person, even educated or uneducated, has a right to create in different ways. One elephant can be made in 1,001 ways. And that's what I believe in. And I understand now the creative process in a certain way. And that's how, one day I walked first into the office of Indian Express, and I said, I'd like to write about art. And the editor told me that, okay, why don't you go and cover Kathakali? Now in my life, I'd never seen Kathakali with any idea. I didn't know the language, I didn't know what words to use, everything. And I was supposed to go there by 4 and give the write-up by 8. And I was in a total mess, but I did it. And the next day it appeared with my write-up and a drawing. He said, make a drawing, you're an artist. I said, okay, I made a drawing of it. And that's how I became the art critic. And then I moved on to Times of India, where I have been there since 1979 till 2014. So that's how my whole process went on, and I became an art critic. But in those days, the published editors were such that they would sort of give you half a page. Nowadays, you just see one photograph in the newspaper or a small little thing like that. So I was very lucky that I found such editors who believed in me. I was also highly critical, and I would go into great detail to analyze a work of art, which was sometimes appreciated, sometimes not. But basically, that's how the freedom I was given. And I did that, and they would give me the freedom to also do other subjects. So that's how, in a way, that became a training to sort of work upon the technique of writing. So from columnist, for a very long time, I've also written about every possible subject, including food and women and nature and cities, basically cities, and Ahmedabad is my closest to my heart, but especially the old city and the heritage. I've been very involved with it for a very long time. This writing columns which I call short prose basically. It's not just columns which eventually goes into pasti and we give it to the pastiwala, but it was definitely short prose which helped me to, and I started thinking that and by then I was extremely, how do you say, confused with a name like Esther. A name like Esther, because of her father, somehow the David made some sense and it's easy to say David. But to say Esther is a little sort of not so comfortable. So how do you pronounce my name? Do you start with an E or an A? That was the problem with most people. So they would give me all sorts of names. And at one point I got so fed up. Like once somebody said extra, so I said, great, I'm the extra David. And I said, great, this is wonderful, I love it. So I said, sometimes if I'm in a certain situation where nobody's going to ask me which community and which village and which this and which that, I would say my name is Asha. Asha Patel, Asha Shah, whatever. So that was the best way of getting out of the E or the A, you know. And then what does Esther mean? So I was myself confused about Esther. And then I did ask around, and then it's sort of somewhere concerned with one of our festivals, which is known as Purim. And she was queen in Persia. And it all happened and then she liberated her people from Persia. So this happens in March, and that was the time I was around born, like. So I was named Esther. It also means in a way Hebrew, like say evening star. So then I understood, but that was not enough. I had to understand much more. So that is the time I wrote this rather abstract novel about how do you understand your Jewish background. And I grew up with 4 cousins actually. Now they are all scattered all over the world, so to say 1 or 2 or no more and everything. But anyway, so, and we had no idea. We lived like Indians totally. So I said, so I put some from the old city house in Delhi. Darwaza, I put all the characters. There were 40 of us actually. So, and I was the youngest. So I put, and I was the observer. I was very silent and quiet and shy. And some of you may not believe it anymore, but I was very shy. So I would just observe everybody. And I said, okay, so that's how I started writing The Walled City. And I'd like to show you the cover of The Walled City, in which I took both elements, the Jewish Star of David and also the Indian, where it's used, I think, in Gayatri Yantra or something like this. And I just found this before I wrote The Walled City, 20 years before I found this. And I had kept it. I said, the day I write my first novel, I will put it on my cover. So this is the cover of The Walled City. Actually, I started writing at mid-40s. When I was in my mid-40s, I left the art world totally. I just teach a little, that's all. And I went into the area of this. At that point, I did not realize where I was going. But I knew that I was searching for homeland. And this was the book that led me to the homeland that I was searching for. I'll tell you how next. After Walled City, again I went through a little confusing period. So I wrote about the women I had worked with in outsider art and the stories they had told me about their lives. It also has 2 Jewish short stories, but otherwise it's basically about women I have known and how they got empowered through art. I was teaching at design schools. One of them was NIFT, and I was in Delhi at a fashion show. I was teaching at Gandhinagar NIFT, and I was at a fashion show in Delhi. And I went to meet my publishers, and they said, why don't you write about 5 generations or 6 generations of a Jewish family in India? That is how Book of Esther happened. It's a mega novel. This is Book of Esther, in which I had to, for the first time, forget all my abstract ideas and research. Research about Jewish life. Research about Jewish lifestyles. Research about everything to do with Judaism. And I sort of wrote, and because I didn't know so much, you saw in the video clip, Joseph Pingale was singing the Hebrew prayer, and affectionately I call him Johnny Bhai. His wife is Julie Ben, who helped me with the food, the study of food. So Johnny Bhai educated me. He's a simple person who educated me about Jewish life. But one thing about being a writer, you cannot just sit back and say, I wrote a book. So you have to go through it many drafts and many times. And while I was going through and editing it, I said, but there's something ringing wrong in my book. And the ringing wrong part was that my book was very Gujarati, because I am totally Gujarati. And I am Esther Ben, really Esther Ben. So I said, okay, something is wrong. And then I said, but my grandmother used to speak in Marathi and wear 9-yard saris. So I said, I must go to Alibag. So I went to Gateway of India, took a boat and went to Alibag. And the minute I landed there, very strangely, and this rarely happens to me, is that I felt at home. Again, the word at home, homeland, both get connected somewhere. This was actually my native place, according to me. And immediately I connected with all the people who were living there. And I studied and I saw that what is the culture of the Jews who had lived there when they first came to India. So that's how Book of Esther happened. And that's where I discovered Prophet Elijah. And it is said that Prophet Elijah likes Bnei Israel Jews. And Bnei Israel Jews believe in him because while he was going to heaven from Haifa, he came to India, to Alibag, to meet us, and there was a rock on which his chariot of fire went past and through a groove, and we worship it. So I'd like to show you, it's known in Marathi as Eliyahu Tapa, the rock of Elijah. Just a simple rock in a village near a pond where there is this little groove, and people of all, we light candles, and Hindu community people, they light agarbattis and diyas and put flowers. Muslim community comes and puts a green cloth, but 3 of us, we worship. He's known as Ghodak Dev or Burak. But we call him Eliyahu Nabi, Elijah, Prophet Elijah. This is how Prophet Elijah came into my life and has stayed on. To me, he looks like Michelangelo's painting of God, like in a sense. Yeah. So from there, the whole journey gets going. Then I wrote about our dress sense, how from 9 meters of sari we went to 5. And then in Alibag itself, I discovered there were a lot of synagogues which were not being used, and a lot of old people living there because their families had left for Israel. And during that time, I also found out that there was an Auntie Rachel living in Pakistan, because I received a letter from a journalist in Pakistan that her name was Auntie Rachel, and she was looking after a cemetery. But when she became very old, the synagogue had been burned down. She was sent to Israel, where she died. So, and then while I was in Baroda, I became involved because my way of being Jewish is helping my community, like putting it on the heritage side, getting security, doing all sorts of, it's called mitzvah, means a good turn. So I do all the good turns for my synagogue. So I was in Baroda, and there was a cemetery which was being taken by estate agents to make a sort of a mall, and we fought with the citizens initiative, and we got it back. So that is how I found, and then in Alibag I had already discovered all this food, because I was invited to every possible Jewish house. They didn't mind my bindi and all that. So they invited me, and I discovered an absolutely different type of food which my grandmother used to cook. So in Book of Rachel, each chapter starts with a recipe. And then another publisher told me, why don't you write short stories about Jews? And I said, okay, I'll write, but I'll set them all in a housing society. And that was called Shalom India Housing Society, in which I discuss the cross-cultural conflict that we go through, this whole search for homeland. And that happened in Shalom India Housing Society. So, and it was Nissim Ezekiel who had told me, the poet, long back, that we suffer from cross-cultural conflict. So this was Shalom India. Most of the covers and illustrations are by me. So this is what it is. Then I also wrote my father's zoo, because it was an integral part of my growing up and what it means to grow up in a zoo. So this is one of my illustrations of the tiger Raju, and then we had a lion Montu and all, and we named them all at home. And then I was getting involved a little in the art world. So let's show this. This is a serigraph I did for Archer. It can be seen at Crossword also. It's my love for rickshaw, and which eventually resulted in the book on Ahmedabad city with the past. And these are some of the ways that where, and I have, so this is how, I mean, I went through the whole of Ahmedabad. This book was not possible without some rickshawalas who have become family friends. They took me around Ahmedabad, and I studied Ahmedabad, I wrote about Ahmedabad, I collect stories, I continue to collect stories, and I'm very passionate about this particular subject about cities. Just one little thing, and then I'll tell you about reaching the homeland. I just want to show the exterior of the synagogue. This is the exterior of the synagogue. Some of these photographs are by Howard Spodek, who also comes here to set. Then this is the interior of the synagogue, and you see, if you were next one, yeah, this is how the young people. This is bar mitzvah, when a young man is 13 or 14, is given adulthood by giving a prayer shawl and they're wearing kippas. And they are also taught to blow a shofar, the sound of which, even today, gives me goosebumps, and I want to understand more about being Jewish. It's one of the most amazing sounds. Sometimes it can sound like a shank, but it's a very ancient sound. And we still blow it at the synagogue on certain days, and some people are taught how to blow the shofar. Can you see the next one? Yes, finished all the photos. Anything remaining? No? Okay, thanks. Good. So, actually, if you were to see me in the street, you wouldn't believe that I'm a Jew. But the minute we enter our synagogue, everybody covers their head with a sari or a scarf, the men cover their head with a kippah and a prayer shawl. Prayers are said in Hebrew. There are very strict norms. Even there is a dietary law of kosher which we follow in India by using coconut milk so that we don't have to mix milk and meat together. So these are some of the things that I have learned through the years. And through that, even at the Sattvic Food Fair by Anil Gupta, we have had a Jewish stall. And the journey continues. Now coming to the final stage about before I tell how Ahmedabad and why Ahmedabad. So I use Ahmedabad as a stage for all my novels except for one or two. Can we show that video? And I'll tell you how I feel about Ahmedabad. And then I'll tell you about Homeland and that'll be the end. What was it actually? It was, first of all, I want to tell you, like, I'm going to twist Michelangelo's saying in another way. Inside me, there was a sea of stories. But as a sculptor, I was locked in a block of wood, so I had to break it open. And my novels are my Jewish voice. Because I had a dream and I wanted to recreate my experience of being an Indian Jew through my novels. Do I have 5 minutes to read about? Yeah? And this is one of my favorite passages from The Walled City. And it took me 3 years to write it. And when young authors come to me, I tell them that sometimes you have to write 50 times, sometimes you have to write 100 times, but you have to keep on writing and editing your work. There is no magic stick. Anyway, that's not preaching. I'll end with this and just say one word at the end, that this is the part that I wrote, that hands, dusty with the earth of both lands and wet with my tears, I wonder about Jerusalem. Samuel stands still like a statue over the grave. The wax from the candle burning his hands, I want to ask him, from where we come and where we go. We do not know from where, but we know why. From sure death, expulsion, exile, homes broken, disrupted, burnt, from ruin to ruin, with the hidden book, the book lost in the shipwreck. Eyes watching King Solomon's golden temple, the Exodus, crossing the sea, the 10 lost tribes, calling out to one another in lonely faraway lands, a long journey into the dark night, following the Silk Route from Yemen, Rome, Spain, Navgaon, preserving oil from coconuts under the sleepy eyes of the ox, before Christ, after Christ, the story of exile, the book lost in the Arabian Sea, closing in on the freedom of our minds, our breath, our thoughts, our prayers to the God without a face in the land of eyes, Jerusalem with the golden stones, eyes swimming like fishes in the turquoise sea of Galilee. The story repeats itself. Farewell, leave everything and start all over again. Circumcise your sons, observe the Shabbat, skins changing color, graves on the shores of Navgaon, 7 couples crouching together in the womb of the earth, mysterious dwelling places of my ancestors. I am just the seed of a buried tree. Thank you.
I don't think we were disappointed by that extraordinary, generous, epic narrative of a life being wonderfully lived. And in you all are the beginnings of wonderful lives. And so I think today, and in the context of this series of talks, where coming from the very specific focus of your classroom and of your particular structure of daily chores and assignments, we also have to know that there's a world out there, and that's the world that you come from and are going to go back into. So thank you again, Esteban, for a wonderful, generous account of your journey, which is clearly only still beginning. There's an awful lot more to go. And it happens that she has a very particular background that's, in that sense, unusual. But each one of us comes from somewhere. So I think she will be the first to acknowledge the preciousness of every single person's story. And it's not just because she happens to have a different story, but that these stories are in us. So anyway, thank you again, and clearly there's a wonderful chance for any of you to ask questions about her, to reflect a little bit on yourselves, or start another little tale, if that's possible. Anyone yet thinking on those terms?
Thank you for this wonderful insight you gave us. My question is, you as Esther David, Bene Israel Jew, and Esther Ben, can you list 5 differences in, as a common man would want to know? 5 differences between Esther David, Bene Israel Jew, and Esther Ben and the Bari.
What I forgot to say was that besides this whole veneer that you saw, that the minute we enter the synagogue, we transform. Maybe if you are there with me, you may not even recognize me. I'm not the same person. Because as you know, Leonard Cohen's that famous song, it's a secret life. The minute we enter there, everything changes. And that is somewhere within us. The outside, what you call structure or whatever we do, I would say that I am very Indian, very Gujarati. Consider myself very woman. So the 3 things are very clear in my head. The fourth thing is that somewhere I belong to a zoo, so there is a certain wildness. That's how. And the fifth is that I belong to the Jewish community of Ahmedabad, where I try to do, because I am very clear that I don't think I can sing prayers like Johnny Joseph Pingley. So my way of functioning as Esther David is using Esther David's background and name and father's name to save whatever is left, because we are now a disintegrating community in India. We are 145 in Ahmedabad. We get together, we eat together. Only twice a year we may not eat together. Otherwise, for all festivals, as the whole family is, most families are abroad, we are together. And we also have this Malida. I think we forgot to show the Malida platter. Where is the young man here? What's his name? Okay. Can we show the Malida platter? This is where we have wish fulfillment to Prophet Elijah. And we have poha, that is flaked rice, mixed with coconut and sugar. Dates for the dessert. Poha is India. And 2 types or 3 types of, and this desi rose, red roses to give the fragrance to our lives. Bananas which have soft trunks. Apples which have harder trunks. So it's a Hebrew word for prayer for that. And this is the Malida that we offer to Prophet Elijah as a form of sometimes a wish fulfillment, a secret desire, or many things. So as you see that there is a lot of Indianness like a prasad, which no other Jewish community of the world practices. And the Indian Jews did not take any permission from any rabbi or Israel or anywhere. They decided that we have a right to worship Prophet Elijah the way we want. So this is how we worship Prophet Elijah with a Malida. Can you switch it off? And I also what I wanted to also say was that we don't have a rabbi in India except for 1 or 2 American rabbis. One is in Kochi, one is in Bangalore. What is in Bombay is Chabad House, which is a different American organization with a rabbi. But we basically, Bnei Israel Jews, don't really have a rabbi. We have again taken the right to say that any elder in the community who has had the bar mitzvah, that's the prayer shawl ceremony like a janoi, can lead a prayer. That is the freedom we have taken, and that's how we continue. So we don't say that we don't have somebody to lead the prayers, so nobody will lead the prayers. No. We have anybody who's an elder who can lead the prayers will do. Anybody can blow the shofar. They will blow the shofar. So this is how we function in Ahmedabad. The person who leads the prayer, as you saw Johnny Bhai, is known as a cantor. And as we have used a mixture of Hindi words also, he is known as Hazan. And when there is a circumcision, we have to pay a mohel, that is the person who does it. You can also go to a hospital. They prefer a mohel, who is somebody who does the circumcision, who is a Jew from Bombay. You have to pay his airfare and hotel stay and look after him and give him a car, and then he flies back. So, and so far there's never been a mishap. So this is how it's more or less runs together. About kosher food, they are very strict, that we do not, we follow the rules of not mixing milk with meat, and that's the 6-hour difference. But basically, we most Indian Jews are vegetarian, because in the absence of getting anything kosher, we cannot. So we make things by our own hands, and we follow this law. And also, in the absence of wine, as being in a dry state, we make sharbat with black currants. And that's why Shalom India Housing Society, I used the protagonist as Prophet Elijah, according to Passover, which falls on 31st, we will be meeting at the synagogue, is that he sort of visits all homes from Japan to America on Passover night for 2 nights. And we offer him a goblet of wine. So I thought this was very funny. And I thought he must be so drunk by the end of the second night. But what happens in Gujarat? That was my biggest problem. So I created my own story and made him the hero of my novel.
So any more thoughts to share? Okay.
I'm going to take, is this working? Alright, so I'm taking advantage of my privilege here, I'm sorry. But you were talking about the kind of things that give you goosebumps, and I think what gave me goosebumps in this entire presentation was the way in which the idea of homeland started with the loss of books, which I experience as visceral, and somehow was resolved with the regaining of books, with the regaining of your books, and the way in which you ended your presentation by reading that fragment to us, and that gave me goosebumps. Thank you. But connected to that, I also,
That's working.
is it working?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, I'm paranoid. So, what I keep returning to is this sense that homeland is such a visceral experience. It's such a visceral experience. It's such a sensuous experience. There's so much sound in the language. It's not just language as a language, but it's the sound of the language. It's the smell, the aroma, the taste of food. There's so much to this experience of homeliness and of a homeland that's felt on the skin. So I was wondering if you'd like to say more about that. Maybe?
As I told you before when I started off that the wandering Jew concept is all about land, basically, and where you belong. And Amos Oz, who is the Israeli writer who has written extensively in this book called How to Cure a Fanatic, in which he writes about the whole concept of land. And this is a thing that is very much plays around in most Jewish minds as to where do we belong and who we are. It's quite, and it may be quite universal also. But when it comes to, as I told you, that when I am at the synagogue, I remain very quiet. I just listen and I look, that's all. Is because everybody has something to say which is so interesting, and I want to sort of document it all and put it into my sort of creation of the Jewish literature part. Is so far it was always foreigners writing about Indian Jews. And that was always, whenever I read it, I felt there was something missing in that. And I am, in most senses, I am uncomfortable at many religious events anywhere in India. And that's the time I become an outsider. But I feel the same in my own synagogue where I don't understand everything. But yet we cannot deny that I am the insider. So I sort of make use of my quietness by being the insider who is there for them. That's one thing they know, that if there is a problem at the synagogue, all they have to do, or a Jewish family, all they have to do is to call me, and I do help. Because that's the only way I can do what I cannot do what Johnny does. So that's how I am Jewish. Well, I said that we say, and we say till now, although a large part of our community lives in Israel and other countries, is that India is motherland. Our mother tongue is Marathi. Some of the youngsters, 5th generation Jewish, Israeli born Indian Jews, let me say it like that. Because a lot of people call me Israeli, I say no, I'm Indian. So they do speak broken Marathi, Hebrew. The older generation is unable to, because it's a little difficult. But they do try. But basically, they all believe that India is motherland. And during festivals, now like 31st now that we're going to meet for Passover, Pesach, there will be so many Indian born, not only Israeli Jews, but from all other countries who will come to our synagogues because they feel something very welcoming, very warm, and the way we do the Passover Seder is something unique, and they do come here, back to India, just to celebrate festivals. The second thing is that in Israel, we have newsletters all over. They have a Marathi newsletter called My Boli, Mother's Tongue. So this is the strength of it. Is the connection with India has not broken. They have not fully assimilated into Israeli societies. This is also said by the scholars. And it is a little difficult sometimes. The second thing I wanted to say that we are 4,000 Jews in India. But today, Bnei Israel Jews, that's my community, is the largest, which is 2,000. And there are pockets all over India, but we are the largest community today. The second thing is that when we say motherland, immediately the people of my community say, but Israel is our fatherland. So fatherland, and then somebody else will immediately join in and say homeland. That's our homeland. Because even my grandmother, whom I showed you, she would make, like all grandmothers do, that make everybody feel that, all the grandchildren feel that I love you the most. It was typical of all grandmothers, also. But she would hug us and whisper in our ear, next year in Jerusalem. In Marathi, she would say, and she would not say Jerusalem, but she would say Yerushalayim. That's the typical Hebrew way of saying it, and that was how it was. The seed is put in all minds from a very early age that eventually you go to Israel. So one of my works of documentation of Indian Jews is named I Am a Seed of the Tree, is because that's how the seed is already put there. When it comes to homeland, so this is how the three things, the wandering Jew eventually finds homeland in Israel. For me, geographically, whatever, at the moment I'm here, as I say, at the moment I'm here. This is again the seed part of it. But I haven't brought my book. The one thing I want to tell you is, my homeland is when I open the World City or all my books, I am at home. I reach home.
The story goes on. Now, just to pick up on a most important character that you have alluded to many times, and which connects us all together, is your grandmother. And so each of us has a grandmother, maybe still alive, maybe two grandmothers if you're lucky, or maybe not. Maybe there's a memory of a grandmother. But that role in our lives is an extraordinary one. And I think that's a universal figure, that no matter what tradition you're from, whether it's Jain or Hindu or Muslim or Jewish or Christian, whatever, it is a role that each of us have had an extraordinary relationship with. So maybe some of you might have connections with your granny you'd like to tell us about, or is that something you'd like to remember yourselves? So obviously, while Esther Ben is giving her narrative, I'm keen on hearing yours. So whether it comes out today in the context of this gathering, or whether you bring it with you and chat among yourselves or reflect, that's really the purpose of this gathering. So if anyone else wants to add anything, share anything, how this budget.
But like you said, that your community has been here for from 2,000 years.
Yeah.
And like, how does your community embrace inter-religion marriages? Like, from these many years, is there any And is it difficult in your community, or is it like easy to go right now, or how is it?
It's a very, very delicate question, which is very difficult to answer. I hope there are no Venezuelan Jews here. I'm not supposed to talk about it. It's very difficult, and there's again one thing that I may have forgotten to talk about is that we have a matriarchal society. We have a matriarchal society where the women have total power about decision making and preserving the Jewish tradition rituals in the home and in the community and wherever they are. So the matriarchal gives them a certain power. So because they lived in the desert for so many years, it was decided that the woman knows who are her children. So if a mother is Jewish, the children become automatically Jewish. So that is one power that the Jewish women have. For many years, Indian Jewish women did not know that they had this power till they became more educated. They started going abroad and they went to talks where this was discussed. Yes, when a Jewish woman marries outside the community, it does pose many questions. But I think if the Jewish men marry outside the community, it's a bigger problem because they are not so easily accepted back into the community unless they go through a very long process where it is expected that they lead a Jewish life, or they have to leave, the girls have to leave the husband at home and they can come to the synagogue with their children and they will be accepted with affection. Not necessarily that they will be so bothered, but these young men who do get married outside the community, they do face greater problems. But there are little escape routes for this, and I'm sorry, I would like to tell you how, but that would be revealing too much of a big secret, which our small microscopic community would be very disturbed if, so I cannot go too much into detail, but there are many ways and methods which have been found for these young men, and eventually it also depends on his wife from the other community. And there is a little hitch. If they first get married according to a non-Jewish method, they will never be accepted into the community. If they go through the civil marriage, they will be accepted. But if they go through any other religious, are you interested in any Jewish girl?
I just wanted to know because you said it's a very small community.
Yeah. It is very difficult, it's very problematic. Everybody watches everybody. And as I told you, it's a very delicate issue, so I cannot tell you which route to take. If you ever want to take that route, ask me.
Offering plenty of services here. But we do.
Arthur, I have a question. So it's a somewhat personal question. What do you answer when you ask what is your curd?
Are you Venezuelan?
No, but I lived with one for 2 years.
Okay, that's another thing in this whole story. It's good you ask questions because we can get into things which I may have forgotten. Okay, when we first landed on the Alibaug coast, there were some dead, some alive. So the local people living on the coast, they tried to do a joint cremation. But those who were a little alive, they shook their hands and they said, no, 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 our people have to be buried. So that was one little point. Now they are all, there is, I don't know whether you've been to Alibag?
Yes.
Yeah. So there is a monument, like a obelisk made by Israel, where all the people who died during the shipwreck are buried. Eventually, those who lived, they went and sort of spread into Alibag, and they sort of took to oil pressing. They were known as telis, oil pressers. So, oil pressers, growing rice, and supari. Those three things. And because they had faced persecution and they had become so close to Maharashtrian and Konkani life, they decided that their names would carry the name of their village. So, like say, if they were from Navgaon, they would say, I am Joseph Benjamin Yeshua Navgaonkar. So, in all our commitment, it's just that my family was a little on the other side. So we removed I come from Danda in Alibag. So in principle, my surname is Dandekar. But it is not, I don't use it. But everybody else in my community, they all have a Kar. And like say, as I said, it is the name of the village to which we are, how do you say, we are grateful that they accepted us. And sometimes we are also known as Konkanist Brahmins. And we have a similar sort of storyline with Saraswat Brahmins. And then there is a story of Parshuram, where Parshuram is supposed to have saved these those who survived the shipwreck. So this is how the whole. What was your question? I forgot.
Because when I go out with my friend, like I went to the river prayers with my friend, and everyone started asking me what her Kar was. So like that's such a common question.
Yes, a lot of young men there. A lot of weddings are also. The one who asked about conversion. A lot of marriages are also held by Kars. Like you are from that Kar, then it's okay. If you are from that Kar, then it's not okay. So this Kar is very important. It also shows their social status. It also puts them in a certain place and okay, you are from this place. That is how. The Kar establishes the definite point that you are a Bani Israel Jew. Otherwise, there is no other way of, like say the Baghdadi Jews and the Cochin Jews, they don't have this problem. But in Bani Israel Jews, we have to establish from where you are, what was your, I'll just tell you a small story. I'm not a very social media person, but I have a small page which some friends have put up, and on that suddenly there was one little message that my friend Cher Ashtamkar from Israel, she is in India and she is looking for her great-great-grandmother in the graveyard in Ahmedabad. Can you please help her? So first I have become very suspicious about this social media, so I was not very sure, but then I was convinced that no, what is the harm in meeting her? So I said okay. So I met her, and I think I met the most wonderful person. Her name was Cher, but she was Ashtamkar. So immediately you're sure, Acha, she's Ben Israel, no problem. Safe, no problem. So that's how she told me her whole story. I helped her to find the grave, and I think it establishes the Ben Israel identity, the Kar. This is a question that is asked to me all the time. You see, when these these Israelis after army, the Israeli soldiers, once they finish army, they travel through India, and they go all over, and then some rabbi comes and takes them back. But more or less they love India, so they travel Goa, Pushkar, Dharamshala, there are 5-6 places they hang around, and they don't have very good reputation. But the young Israeli girls, they put bindi, they do all this, they do hairstyles, they do this, they do everything, right? But for Indians, there is a problem. We were in India, so the bindi means some sort of religious thing. While I myself think it's a sticker, and it looks very nice on me. No other reason. And for those who really grill me about it, I have only one way of saying it. With some Jews in the past, they did not like it, so they would tell me, like, it's happened many times. So I said, if I put a bindi, I become a Hindu. And if I remove the sticker, I become a Jew. So is this sticker so much power it has that it can change me totally? So it's India.
Anyone else would like to? Anyway, there's plenty to take away with you and to reflect on, and it's wonderful to be able to get out of the studio and know that there's a great world to be part of. So I think if people would not like to continue and you're happy with what you've said, maybe we can anchor the convention away with a wonderful round of applause. On your behalf also, may I thank the founders of the Foundation Studio for bringing all this together, for Samir Wai and Kathy Ben for making this happen, for all the volunteers who made this possible as well, for the great team that make us all audible and visual, and all the sound and light people here that make this possible. And thank you for coming, and treasure this occasion, bring it back with you, and reflect on it and see where you belong yourselves. So thanks again, Mr. Benefit.